The Spurs didn't lose this series because they weren't good enough or weren't talented enough. In fact, for most of the series, they looked like the better team. They led for over 70% of the time in these games. They blew double-digit leads in every single game, including a 29-point lead in Game 4. And despite leading for a majority of the series, they somehow still lost in just 5 games. That's not a talent problem. That happens because of mistakes. Young team mistakes, coaching mistakes, veteran player mistakes, and it just became awfully clear what the problem was. They just weren't ready. When San Antonio traded for De'Aaron Fox, moments like this were exactly why they did. Not the regular season, not January and February. The Spurs needed a veteran lead guard who could calm things down when New York made a run, someone who could just organize the offense. For postseason runs, and this year specifically, the finals. Control the tempo, create easy shots, and at least at the minimum just provide some sort of leadership for this young team that they desperately need. Instead, De'Aaron Fox looked nervous and very uncomfortable and just completely out of rhythm. He averaged 13 points per game while shooting 34% from the field and 25% from 3. And in the closeout game, 7 points on 3 for 15 shooting from the field. For someone who was brought in for some sort of stability for a young team, that's just not good enough. And let's talk about the play briefly. When you're holding a late lead in a game, especially when there's no shot clock, you are not supposed to shoot the ball unless you are completely wide open, nobody's chasing you, which typically is just a regular season situation. In the playoffs, people are going to be behind you. OG was just a step or two behind him. He knows he's there and decides to still go up and challenge him. OG gets the block, Knicks get the ball, timeout. Now, the Spurs as a team shouldn't have lost a 29-point lead, but this was just the icing on the cake. All Fox had to do was just dribble the ball out, run the baseline till he got fouled. He gets 2 free throws. But instead he gets blocked, the Knicks get the ball back, and on the following possession he makes another mental mistake. The Spurs' game plan was to double team Brunson and Fox be the second defender to come over. As you can see, the last 5 seconds of an NBA playoff game, you have to box out. There is no excuse. But Brunson decides to still shoot the ball, and when he does, Fox just ball watches instead of running back at an angle to get in front of OG. Yes, he was the second defender on the double team, and that is a hard box out. But you have to go at an angle and at least get in his way, bump him, stop his momentum about to jump. You can't just let him leap and you're just looking at the ball. You just need more from your veteran all-star guard, and they just didn't get it. And now there's going to be some changes, I assume, I hope so, for the team, and he's definitely going to be a part of the change. And I assume that change is going to be making Dylan Harper a starting guard on the team and letting De'Aaron Fox go, because the Spurs might have found their future lead guard in Dylan Harper. He was incredible this series. He averaged 18 points and 6 assists on pretty much 50% from the field. He had constant rim pressure, physical defense, energy, confidence, aggression, and at times looked like the best player on the court for the Spurs. Meanwhile, still taking the assignment of guarding Jalen Brunson on the defensive end as well. And yes, Brunson still had an all-time series, but Harper did make him work very hard for it. Not to say that Harper played perfect, he still did make some rookie mistakes, over-aggressive drives and kind of just forcing it when there's 2 to 3 defenders already there, bad fouls on Brunson at half court, just pressuring too much, too many hand checks. You can just tell there were times where he was a little too sped up from the game and just the adrenaline, momentum, all that kind of stuff. But those are fixable mistakes. He's a rookie, he's young. Those are things that are going to happen when you're in a finals game and you're playing as well as you are. You can't have your backup rookie guard outplaying your max contract all-star point guard. That cannot happen. And let's talk about the bench for the Spurs entirely. The minutes that Kornet was on the court, the Knicks went at him immediately, wasted no time. And they got whatever they wanted, just getting downhill and attacking him every single play. That forced the Spurs to have to get him back in quickly at times, which didn't give him much of a breather, which led to some being fatigued problems later in the game, which I'll talk about later. But when you're letting a team constantly get downhill every single play and they have the confidence that there's nobody to protect the rim, that's a recipe for a momentum swing and for a run. Kornet was not good this series at all. Keldon Johnson, the sixth man of the year, was pretty much unplayable for majority of this series. And for a sixth man of the year to average 4 points a game, couldn't stretch the floor, and did not provide any of the energy, tenacity, and dirty work that usually makes him what he is. He was just unable to provide that. Spurs bench simply was just not good outside of Dylan Harper. And come playoff time, the bench is where it becomes the most important, as you can see with the Knicks. Now, Wemby was not a perfect player this series either. He did not play his best brand of basketball. I'm well aware of that. He had moments of looking nervous. He had moments where he just did not look like he was mentally checked in, and had some mental errors, mental mistakes that you just can't have from your star player. But just like Dylan Harper, I'm understanding that this is Wemby's third year in the league. They really weren't supposed to be here, and there has to be some sort of growing pains. You don't typically see a young team like this just do it all in their first year. They have to have some sort of learning lesson, and they weren't even in the playoffs last year, so this is their learning lesson this year. But outside of Wemby's poor mistakes, shot selection at time was really bad, falling in love with jumpers too much, which I think is a problem of being fatigued. You just settle for jumpers. And I think a big takeaway of this finals was Wemby looked absolutely exhausted, not because he's out of shape, but because the Spurs are asking him to do way too much. He's asked to protect the rim, anchor the defense, switch on the guards, defend pick and rolls, clean up mistakes when the guards let their man drive by them, and then rebound. And then on the other side of the floor, you're expected to score, create offense, carry late game possessions. That's not sustainable for a long playoff run or even fourth quarters alone in the playoffs, let alone the NBA Finals. By the third quarter at pretty much every game, Wemby was gassed. Not because he couldn't handle the finals, but you're asking him to solve every single problem and fill every gap that the team has. And when your best defensive player is also your best offensive player, they're going to get burnt out at some point. You don't typically see a person do both sides of the ball the best on a deep playoff run. It's not really sustainable for long runs. So yes, Wemby did not play his best brand of basketball, but there were also some mistakes in terms of substitutions when you're doing it, and it just did not allow Wemby to get a lot of time to rest. And I think some of the mental errors and some of the poor shot selection was due to fatigue. And now to Mitch Johnson. Now he deserves credit for getting them to the finals. A young team, a young coach. I'm going to give you your flowers for getting to the finals. Props to you. But this series exposed all of his inexperience and then some. Missed timeouts, hesitation to adjust to certain things that Mike Brown was doing, refusing to shorten De'Aaron Fox's role was one of the biggest mistakes, especially in the last two games. The substitution patterns, especially at times during the games, just didn't really make sense, especially when some guys didn't have it going or something was working and you just ended it too early. There were just some dumb mistakes going on. Not to mention taking Wemby out with 5 minutes left in the elimination game. This isn't game one or the regular season. Wemby has to try to tough it out or foul and act injured to give yourself a couple extra minutes of breather room. You got to figure out something, but taking him completely out of the game is the last option he should have had in that moment. I feel as if Mitch Johnson showed all his cards in the OKC series in the beginning of this series, because obviously something was working in the first quarter and a half, but then after that they might as well have not even had a coach. They might as well have just all gone home. The game is over, because that's when the game was over, after the first quarter and a half for this series. And I was getting on Fox about the not leading the team on the court, not slowing the game down and pulling the guys together. The coach should be able to do that as well. So to not be able to rally your guys together and not look as if you have things under control, being a calm presence and clearly not holding certain guys accountable is a recipe for failure. Now, Stephon Castle did not play his best two games, the last two games of the series, but for majority of the playoffs, Stephon Castle was great and was also great defensively for stretches during this run as well. For someone who had a really raw offensive game coming into the NBA, to have some offensive spurts and stretches in the finals and playoffs entirely, I got to give him that. He wasn't poor the whole series, but his last two games, he was 3 for 17 So you gotta get on him a little bit about that. And also he does make some dumb turnovers, I will say. The entire playoff run, especially the OKC series when he had 20 turnovers in the first 2 games, I think it was. But those are things you can clean up. You can clean up the mental mistakes of bad passes, not seeing which side guys are going to rotate from, or just forcing passes to Wemby when they're not necessarily there. I'd rather watch a guy play hard and make fixable mistakes as opposed to having an expectation of being a lead guard that can stabilize the troops and you look scared. The Spurs have some offensive issues to figure out as well. They have no half-court offensive identity whatsoever. If it's not a transition bucket in deep playoff runs and games and big moments, they don't have a stable offense, a go-to play, a go-to move, any sort of set that can get them a good shot. They don't have it. I think that'll come with Wemby's growth, being able to get to certain spots that he wants, catching the ball in certain spots, and just being able to get a bucket. I think that'll come with Wemby's game, but you also have to have some sort of sets that slow the game down and create and maximize an offensive possession. The Spurs team had no structure, no organization, no counters to the New York Knicks runs, no adjustments, nothing at all, and just showed a very big maturity gap between these 2 teams and 2 coaches. These aren't talent issues. These are fixable issues and lessons that needed to be learned for any young team. And if the Spurs learn from this series, the rest of the NBA might have an even bigger problem in the future here. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I'm restarting my channel after taking a long break, so any sort of support would truly help. Leave your comment and feedbacks below, and I'll catch you in the next one.